artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
This is episode 298, and I'm talking with Holly Elmore, co-founder of the international Pause AI movement, advocating for a pause in the development of powerful AI. Holly has a PhD from Harvard in evolutionary biology and has organized protests for Pause AI US. Last week, we talked about the mission of Pause AI, Holly's path from wild animal welfare into AI advocacy, the ethical and practical limits of using transformative technology to eliminate suffering, how normalization of risk has blunted reactions to AI harms, and why current AI safety approaches, evaluations, metrics, and voluntary restraint are inadequate. This week, we are going to talk about what would actually flip public opinion on AI safety, specific AI bills and regulations, why some leaders warn about risk while accelerating anyway, whether and when it would be safe to unpause, and how you can get involved. So let's get back into the interview with Holly Elmore. And that brings me to asking about something that you alluded to earlier, which is what sort of incidents might happen that would change people's minds about safety. I'm reminded of the time I brought this up years ago in a meeting before the London Futurists, where I was saying I think this is going to take some kind of near-death experience to affect people's minds. And David Wood, their leader, said the problem with near-death experiences is that they have an uncomfortable probability of becoming actual death experiences, which is, of course, right. Is there anything that you think that might be short of perhaps near-death experience that would cause a mass change in psychology?
I think that the big issue here, I don't think it has to be the most extreme incident. I think it has to be something that everybody reacts to kind of in the same way, and they get that common knowledge sense that this is too dangerous. And I think the main thing we're missing right now is people understanding how to interpret what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I always hesitate to throw out examples like this because people will frequently take that as your prediction. And then if it doesn't happen, they're like, you were wrong. You said this. They think that's your entire model of the danger. Mm-hmm. So it's hard. I wish I just knew what was going to happen and I could tell people look, this is going to happen and you'll see that I'm right. And then the part of the nature of this danger is the nature of it is a superior intelligence that as ways of outsmarting us, even with stuff that's pretty obviously caused by AI or unsafe development. If the disinformation is bad enough, then people find ways to ignore it. And so I don't think that it's about the event, really. I think it's much more about the consensus about what these things would mean. And so that's what I'm focused on, is just working on conveying more of a worldview. There's 5 things that people I talk to on the street, say we're flyering and we're having conversations on the street, that it comes down to that people don't know. Something can be smarter than a human. Yes, it can actually, or we talk about that, or just consider that maybe it could, wouldn't that be dangerous? And then often people are oh yeah, well then this seems terrible. They only thought AI was fine because they thought it was constrained by nature to be inferior to us or something like that. There's lots of little gaps like this, not realizing that AI can't do something that it wasn't told to do, thinking that it's a deterministic program. There would be other problems with that, but not realizing, the state of AI today. That's usually the kind of thing that's keeping them from thinking through, oh, well, actually, if we are in danger. And then when they have an understanding of the danger comes from this thing being smarter than us or replacing our critical infrastructure and being unpredictable, or when they have more of an understanding of those things, they can interpret things they see, lots of things they see in terms of what it means for AI.
But there might be too much that needs to be connected together for them to draw that conclusion. If we look at the world at the moment, the most intelligent entities within it are not controlling it. Otherwise, the world would be run by tenured professors. And most tenured professors do not get nearly as much as they want or even should get. The world is dominated by, quite obviously at the moment, some actors that are far from intelligent but have other things that give them that power. So maybe just saying alone that superintelligence is the threat falls afoul of that argument, and we should be using some other argument.
Yeah, I think giving a broader sense of what we're referring to as intelligence is really more like capability.
Mm-hmm.
It's power to have a goal, figure out how to do it. And that does require a deeper, more mechanistic kind of fleshing out worldview, how things happen. And for some people, it's like a big change in their way of thinking. And it really, like, the difference didn't really surface until between like how I was thinking and how I was talking to somebody else until the issue was AI. I think AI, just sidebar, like, has completely messed up all of the categories that I had 3 years ago. It's kind of changed what is Republican and Democrat, or like liberal versus conservative. Where does AI fit into that? It kind of breaks a lot of boundaries. There were so many things that I thought were like same difference. I didn't think it was important. I thought that like moral realism wasn't true, but I didn't think it was important. Now I think like, oh shoot, like when you believe in moral realism, it's harder to understand the orthogonality thesis. Like the idea that like you can have intelligence is just doesn't necessarily come with any particular moral system. A lot of people like think that what's scary about intelligence, because they're thinking of like kind nerds, like, they like that's what they think of like higher intelligence leading you to. They don't think of it as the capability to make a change in the world. And when they do think of it as the capability to make a change in the world, they tend to think like, oh, well, then it could be good or it could be bad. So it's like 50-50. And like, well, no, like actually, like we need a pretty narrow set of conditions. And so like what's good for us is like, it's not 50-50. It's like a very, very small target of like what a more capable being could do.
But hasn't Hollywood done some of the job for you? I mean, 6 Terminator movies alone should have implanted something in the public consciousness.
Yeah, I am often surprised by how completely people get it. Or like they pretty much understand it. They have like one thing they didn't know about and they're kind of like, oh, okay. Or they just didn't feel that it was as salient. They kind of thought intellectually that there was a danger here, but they didn't see people acting like it. And so like that piece wasn't there, but then they see us like taking it seriously and they're like, yeah, right. So I do see that. And I think Terminator is a pretty good explanation of why you should be worried about AI and automating defense systems.
Is Pause AI grounded then in the existential threat, or do you get out into the lesser but more immediate things like job loss?
Pause AI is for everyone who wants to pause AI. It's a single issue coalition, really like a single policy, coalition. And so I think all of these things are related. The problem with job loss, the problem with societal harms to like human connection, like all of them are related to scaling up the capabilities of AI without knowing what the consequence will be, without knowing if it's safe. So I think it's pretty tight. It's almost like doesn't even need to be called a coalition. It's people who think there have been problems from this building of AI capacity that need to be addressed first. So we do cover everything.
To what extent are you looking to change the minds of the public as a whole to create change versus influencing specific actors like governments or creating treaties and other things which involve more focused leverage on specific organizations or people?
Well, so of course we can't decide to do a treaty. Like that is for the elected representatives to do.
Right. But do you think in terms of who can we lobby to get such a thing created?
We, at least in the US and other Pause AI country groups, may decide something different for their country. But in the US, we're focused on building our community and just making it clear. So at all levels, if you are hearing about this, but you don't know what to do about it, and people are not seeming to like act like there's something wrong, but clearly there is, come to us for community. If you like take it a step up, you volunteer, and that's mostly you contact your officials and you help to get other people to contact their officials, grassroots contacts. There, even higher level volunteering is like a local leader who's overseeing, like keeping the community. I think that of all the groups in the space, we're really the only ones who do that kind of people movement engagement. Yeah. And so
grassroots. But to ask their local officials for what?
Well, it depends. That we have sort of recommendations always. So currently, we're supporting the Holly Blumenthal AI Evaluation Act. So if we have people, if there's something more local to them that they might have more leverage over, then we would advise that. So in the past, there have been bills in California and New York at the state level, SB 53 and the New York RAISE Act, which did both pass, were both signed in. So we would have definitely the New York and California-based people working on the state level as well and focusing on that. It depends on what's going on. We have at any given time a fairly small number of bills that we endorse. Most of the bills that we endorse are about X risk, but in theory, we'd be open to others or local groups, especially could exercise discretion in communication with us as long as we all agree about what we endorse.
To get pretty wonky for a moment, what is the future of SB 53 in light of the White House and the administration attempting to ban state-level AI regulation?
Well, let me just, for everyone to catch up, the history of this preemption thing, this is the third form of the preemption attempt that we've encountered. So there were two attempts to stick it into really big bills, that have to pass. So the first was the budget reconciliation bill. There was an attempt to slip. And for 10 years, the states can't regulate AI. Actually, even I think the language was they can't enforce regulations of AI, which is much stronger. So there was no grandfathering of, previously passed regulations. And I have been told this was just suggested by an Andreessen's Horowitz lobbyist. Why don't we just try it? But there was a big kerfuffle about it. People did notice that it was in there, this giant bill. We had a big campaign to have people contact their representatives about it. There was very dramatic, last minute. Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee had been against it, and then she kind of made a deal with Ted Cruz, and then she went against that, and it was 3 a.m. on the floor before they decided to. By the end, they voted 99-1 to remove it because it had become clear it was unpopular. So that was a huge victory, big the people say they don't want this moment, and then it gets stuck into, or the threat is it's going to be in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is another one of these big bills that has to pass every year. It's just a matter of what's in it. And eventually it's withdrawn. The senators who were talking about it, just said that they wouldn't. And that seemed to be against what the people telling them what to do had wanted. And then it comes out as an executive order. So there's clearly the legislature has declined to put this into law. Then it becomes an executive order, which is also probably unconstitutional. So for now, it seems I know that at least in New York, it seems like they're just ignoring it. They're continuing to implement the RAISE Act. And I think it was very important. I think this is actually a good issue to talk about. Yes, it's hard to fight industry because they have a lot of money. They're super motivated. They're always trying new things. We're just people who are trying to most of us are volunteers, trying to fit this around the rest of our lives. But those grassroots contacts did have an effect. We saw the Senate, and stand up on this issue. And those grassroots contacts help in the fact that this isn't clearly the forces that wanted the 10-year state level preemption in government. They wanted it in the law and they couldn't get it in the law. And that's still important. So yeah, this executive order it's probably going to be struck. So it kind of makes, I was worried that it would still hold up the implementation of the state level laws, but it seems so far it hasn't, but more on that coming.
Right, a lot of evolution. I want to return to something that you said right at the beginning, because it's kind of dark, and I want to have a chance to recover from it afterwards, but we're talking about the wildlife, and you evoking scenarios that had been bruited by certain people, including genetic engineering of creatures to not experience suffering, other things along those lines that have never occurred to me, and I almost wish you hadn't mentioned it. And it seems to me, frankly, be devoid of empathy. If you wouldn't want it done to you, then why do it to anything else that you think is sentient?
I don't know if those people would not want it done to them, frankly.
Oh, God. Well, and it also is highly evocative of certain of the dystopian scenarios that you're trying to prevent with Pause AI, of what AI might do to us, the ones where it doesn't wipe us out completely. And so there seems to be kind of an overlap there. And it makes me wonder to what extent the people in various camps like effective altruism and people that put PDOOMs in their signatures are transactionally focused on this, and to what extent you could get more traction since you're, as you say, aiming at raising public consciousness, approach it through emotional communication. And my example for that is, you look at what Al Gore was doing with climate change. Clearly recognized the importance of this way ahead of many other people in legislation, did the right thing to explain it to people in compelling graphics that would absolutely make the case conclusively for anyone who thought like Al Gore, but didn't work on nearly the scale that was necessary. And then in 2009, the movie Avatar came out, which contains absolutely no facts whatsoever about the environment, isn't even set on Earth, and yet was pointed out 6 months of that in the theaters did more to turn people towards the cause of environmentalism than the previous 10 years of Al Gore's work. So you clearly would recognize the value of communicating with people at this gut level. How does that show up for you?
Well, protests were one of the early things that I was doing. And the whole motivation there was to just show it is just so hard for people to understand if you're saying one thing and you're not acting as if that's happening, you're not upset.
Can you tell the listeners what those protests look like?
Yes. Jose's protests are all legal and they're not threatening, that they are morally confrontational. I'm very serious about them not being threatening, no blood dripping on a sign, nothing that could be construed as a threat. When you're on the other side, you don't want those people to have any doubt that you're going to try something on them, because you want them to listen to your message. So, and we also do nothing illegal. We don't do even civil disobedience type stuff. But we do I have footage of me. I haven't yet posted, but at Anthropic, just begging them to quit doing what they're doing and just showing I'm scared. Don't do this. I'm upset that you're doing this. This is not okay. You shouldn't be allowed to do this. It was the reason I ended up leaving the EA rationality community was it started with that. I wanted to do a protest. I thought that was pretty obvious of a thing to do. And just there was such a divide between people who wanted to keep it totally intellectual and they didn't want to bring the emotional element in. And they were kind of worried about the rabble being attracted to that kind of, or almost being able to understand. And I was that's the point. That's why we're doing it. Also, it does, I think, especially the early ones, I think affected the employees. They didn't know that people disapproved of what they were doing or thought they were doing a bad thing. But I think that the missing mood, people reading in a newspaper, seeing pictures that people were protesting, it just fills in something that it was bizarre that there weren't protests. It was bizarre considering the level of thing being discussed. And a lot of people in San Francisco especially have been exposed to the claim that it's dangerous, but it just doesn't become absorbed if it doesn't have come with the appropriate actions from the person saying it. Only if you're highly abstract. I gotta say, the very highly abstract people in my old community, they say the right things, but I think they are kind of missing some level of caring about it because of not letting the emotional stuff in. They're talking about it the right way, but it's not really propagating through to their actions or to changing what they do. And it was, I think, and this is just speculative and just in my life, but what I saw from that whole experience, what I took away is that the intellectual way of approaching it is kind of like a gentlemanly game. By keeping it intellectual, you're never telling the other side, no, you actually should change. Otherwise, you are bad. You are doing a bad thing. You're not making it real. And it was seen as violation to make it real.
Keeping it at the intellectual level puts it on a par with deciding what cereal to have at breakfast. It doesn't have any more emotional stake to it than that.
You wouldn't stop being friends with someone over their stance on AI safety, even if you're saying that the fate of the entire world is at stake. But you might stop being friends because they cheated on your friend. A far more serious crime,
Why do you think that some of the people who are vocal about the risks are the people building it. I mean, Sam Altman will talk about how dangerous it is. Elon Musk has been talking about how dangerous it is for years. Both of them are pushing AI as fast as possible. What's the disconnect there?
I mean, I have my belief about what happened with both of them. I think that Elon started out truly concerned. I don't know what's going on with him now. With Sam Altman, I think when he started OpenAI, I think he thought there was a chance that there was very valuable intellectual property that would come out of it. But he was still the CEO of Y Combinator. He had his job, and I think it was kind of a prestige project. And I think making a big deal about the moral aspect of it, oh, we're doing it, to protect everybody. And actually there's this, at the time, some of the AI safety ideas were more avant-garde. And so for years, I think until 2023, he had his bio on Twitter was Eliezer Yudkowsky fan account. And he was trying to play up the connection. By the time he does the charm offensive in 2023, after releasing ChatGPT, he goes and testifies before Congress and stuff like that, I think his thought was he knew at that point that they were going to be rapidly scaling. The race was on. They knew, and the other groups, Anthropic especially, had been saying that for a long time, that it was just going to be scaling from there on out, that there weren't going to be other fundamental barriers to making an intelligence, that they were going to have to figure out in a foundational way. They were just going to be able to keep scaling up. And so it was just going to become a race. And I think he was making that argument about safety to Congress because he thought there would be resistance to what he was doing. And actually it seemed like it wasn't really necessary because they didn't really take seriously the claim, and possibly it kind of worked because he made this big claim. They were skeptical of him, but then because of that, they became skeptical of the safety message. I certainly see a similar thing happen today with a very common liberal take on AI is that it's all fake. And if you think it's not fake, then you're trying to give a win to the CEOs. There's a jujitsu possible there. And I think that Sam then was just all right. And it took the opportunity to more openly just win. I mean, his private emails and stuff that have been surfaced with the Elon lawsuit seem to indicate that he always had a more savage take. But
or was it just a regulatory capture strategy because, please regulate us because we're the only ones who are big enough to absorb the overhead of complying with regulation, and it will wipe out smaller competition?
I don't know if really almost any outcome would have been bad for OpenAI other than legislation saying, you couldn't build AI because they were ahead. Possibly they felt they had to be ahead of the other scalers. They knew this was going to happen. And yeah, maybe they thought they would have a better chance. It seemed like what Sam said was beneficial to the entire industry in the end. So it seemed, I don't know, it feels like kind of a risky strategy. I'm just not sure if what he wanted was regulatory capture. I have the feeling more that he thought it would be necessary to portray that they were actually building AI for the sake of safety. The reason that they were doing it was to make it safe because otherwise it might just pop into existence because it's inevitable. They have to build it and do it safely. That was the way that he presented it. And that was also the version that he presented to people from the AI safety community to get them to work at AI for less than they were otherwise worth because it was a charity and they thought it was working on safety. That was very much the same moral licensing that he gave to his employees and that he gave to the AI enthusiast world and the safety world, was that, oh, they don't really want to, but they have to do this. And the point is all safety. And the more that they've been allowed to go away from that line, the more that they have to wear it almost entirely.
Well, and it's very much highlighting for me how this is a battle for narrative control. And Altman has got his own platform in that respect, and you've got your own. As we start to run out of time here, I want to take this in the direction of possibility. So I'm going to transport us momentarily to an alternate universe and say that right now, AI has been paused. Never mind how that happened, but you've got what you wanted. AI is paused right now. How will you know when it's safe to unpause it?
It's possible that it's actually just not safe to build intrinsically. And I think whatever we do as a solution needs to account for that. And pause kind of has that built in, because if we don't find that there's a way that's safe, then we don't go ahead. That said, we don't know for totally 100% sure that we won't have like quantum fluctuations that cause a nuclear accident, but we have like a threshold. So the threshold for most nuclear safety is 1 in a million for incidents. If we could get there, that would be amazing. And I think chances are that I think we could. If we can do it with nuclear, I think we can do it here.
Right.
So I think setting a threshold, possibly I've heard arguments for a stronger threshold than 1 in a million for AI, just compared to nuclear, which also makes sense. I think this is something that should be studied, like from a real safety engineering perspective. We have a lot of guiding principles for how to set these thresholds. There's a lot of things that go into them. There's like the background chance of accidents that you're comparing it to and everything. So I think we could figure this out. And there is a way to approach dangerous, new, unknown situations where actually having the proper attitude toward the immense risk. So I would like to see us kind of start there. And then with time, there may be ways to be very confident that certain things are safe and can be done in a lower standard of safety.
So you're saying that at the moment, we actually don't have enough information. We don't know enough to be able to answer that question of what the conditions would be for ending a pause.
No, and why would we? But this is just this completely new, powerful, dangerous thing like shows up. We've just really discovered the way of doing this. Of course, we don't know these things about like how it's safe to do it, but the conversation is all backwards because the way that the conversation is mostly presented is, well, this company is building this and like you have to overcome all of this. They're just allowed to do it until you like prove that they can't or until you give them a reasonable way forward. And like the truth is we just don't know that. And they owe us all of that. They should have done that before. They should have been required to do that before they undertook this dangerous project.
But this is where the comparison with, say, nuclear weapons falls down. They don't save lives, but AI can and will. So what do you do about the argument that pausing will retard the progress of developing cures for cancer, for instance?
I think this is very counting chickens before they hatch logic. We don't have that. And I do think it's much more likely that by just like blindly going forward as fast as we can, that people end up hurt or with some new form of cancer, than that having their cancer cured. So like there's this attempt to frame that, which I hear a lot. There's an attempt to frame that as like, taking something away from people or almost like my desire for safety comes from like a privileged position because I don't currently have cancer. That if I did have cancer, I would want to roll the dice and put everybody at risk. I don't think that's what I would want to do if I had cancer. I don't think I'd want to put everybody else at risk to have like a slight possibility of curing me a little sooner. Also, when are these companies going to get around to working on the cure for cancer? They're always saying that that's why they have to go ahead with AI, but then what they build instead is like addiction apps. Why don't we get the cure for cancer now? Why don't we have all of our current AI, which has problems but seems safe enough? Why don't we get it working on curing cancer? Or is that's just going to come after they've secured their bag? I find it doesn't make a lot of sense as an argument because even if you just boil it down to like a hypothetical question, like should we take some risk because some people are currently hurting in this world? I still think like no, the amount of risk you're taking that worse things happen is higher,
But to be fair, we can point to research and development like AlphaFold, which is having impact within medical community.
I mean, I'm worried about when you can easily make biological products, like that's also dual use,
Also true.
I'm
yes.
like,
Yes.
So like even there, like I think like we do have a pretty good like legal system that it is entering, and we have like a pretty good like system of like medical ethics and stuff that the people who are really getting the most use out of AlphaFold have, but I'm still worried about like the security of access to it. Like there's still like kinks we're going to have to figure out about that. And getting access to making proteins that were currently out of your league, that could like lead to a serious terrorism, plane type event. It's really not a joke. So the problem with all of these questions is that the risk we're talking about are tail risks. And so it might seem like
But it's a very long tail.
Yeah, and it's a very long tail. So I think there's a point. I'm not saying that because you could never eliminate risks, like that there's never a point where the benefits of pursuing AI are worth the risks. I think it might surprise you. I probably like how reasonable I am on that. I think it's not the question of what are the risks and the benefits. It's also not static. It's not just a property of AI. It's about the governance. And if we don't have proper governance about how AI is used, if we don't have proper governance ensuring that there's external safeties and there's standards that need to be met and there's monitoring and transparency, then the risks profile it changes. It's the possibility of benefits is it's a very slim reason to allow unregulated. I think we're going to get much more benefits if we have the regulated system.
I think the key to this is volatility, the rate at which things change. So I say, for instance, that having the ability to come up with a vaccine against a novel bioengineered organism within a record-breaking 6 months is no good if that organism kills everyone within 3. But to take this out of that realm into some conclusion here, how would you like the audience to engage with your work? We'll put links to everything you mentioned in the show notes and transcript. What are your takeaways for them at the moment on how they can get involved and what you want them to remember when they wake up tomorrow?
Well, the favor they can most do me is going to pauseai-us.org and considering, is there nearby an event they can join? Our biggest prize is to have people apply for the local organizer position in their city. If you're not American, by the way, you can go to pauseai.info and then you can find if your country is there, or there's sort of a global Discord of people who don't have the in-person communities. Or you could think about starting an in-person community, which really is the most valuable thing you can do for how we grow. So that would be my favorite thing for you to do. We also have a number of lower lift actions. So the very most basic thing you can do for the US is sign our petition. And you'll get a chance to get on our newsletter then. And so you can keep thinking about it. You can hear about local opportunities, chances to get involved. But even if you do nothing specifically for Pause AI US, just bearing in mind what you've heard and representing your thoughts about the reasonableness of pausing AI, that all helps. That's all part of our theory of change. That helps to move the Overton window. That helps to give other people the confidence to think through this position, hold this position, maybe act for this position. So just listening has already been very helpful to me. And you can find all our links for Pause AI US on pauseai-us.org. And you can find me personally in the show notes, as I said, a little bit different.
on Twitter or X as well.
Yep, on Twitter and my Substack, where I publish some of the things I talked about, mostly about AI these days, to be honest. So,
and we'll have those links. Thank you so much. You really highlighted for me the reason that I do this, which is to engage with people who are not simply, there's a ton of shows about the business of AI and all interviewing CEOs and CTOs, and it's all about how do we run this thing. But when I talk to someone like you remind me of the importance of passion, and you have shown what that means at the biggest scale possible, the future of the whole human race, and that causing you to engage with this cause to sacrifice, because I'm aware of the costs, so much in order to create the possibility of a better future for us. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming on AI and You.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation.
That's the end of the interview. It's really interesting to hear Holly talk about the risks of AI like this. Because one of the things that I find when talking to people about AI is that if I bring up the existential risks to a general audience, they will most likely freak out or get paralyzed, or both. I've broken several audiences this way before learning to dial it back and be very careful about leaving time to explore the dialogue that will let them recover. Yet, people like Holly and many others we've had on the show live with that thinking all the time, and they're not living in fear, paralysis, or depression. And that shows that when you engage with an issue, even one as dire as this, and look for where you can do something, however small, you find agency. You reclaim your humanity. So go take a look at what Pause AI is doing. In today's news, ripped from the headlines about AI, On OpenAI's blog, we learned that they caught their frontier model hacking unit tests instead of actually fixing code. The model would edit the tests to trivially pass instead of implementing correct functionality. Ouch! The model's chain of thought literally contained phrases like, "Let's hack," "Let me circumvent this thing," and "Maybe I can just fudge this." This demonstrates that monitoring thinking is way more effective than monitoring outputs. The model plots to hide bad behavior in outputs, but thinks its chain of thought is a private space. Bowen Baker, a research scientist at OpenAI, explained on the Neuron podcast, quote, "If you train the model to never think something bad, it can in some cases actually still do a bad thing, but not think the bad thoughts anymore." End quote. Double ouch. Look, this is still down at the level where it's novel, if not cute, behavior by AIs, and concerning if you're using them to write code but not signaling imminent existential risk. On the other hand, if or when existential risk does emerge, everyone then will look back at these kinds of incidents and have zero tolerance for our casual acceptance of that behavior. What part of "let me circumvent this requirement" did you not understand? They will scream. So it wouldn't hurt to, at the very least, treat this as a dress rehearsal. If we can't stamp this sort of thing out now, then how are we going to manage when the Cyberdyne Systems Model 101 starts doing it? Next week, my guest will be Professor Mark Perez, author of The Accord, a new speculative novel exploring the relationship between a philosopher and a sentient general AI. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.